This podcast is part of the Big Heads Media Podcast Network. Go to bigheadsmedia.com for more great podcasts.
This is Things I Found Online, a show about the internet and wherever it may lead us. I am your host, Louise Palanker, here with a delightful comedian co-host, Lori Roggenkamp.
Hello.
We've got a really full studio today, and we have a Zoom guest. It's going to be an exciting show. Buckle in. Today we welcome content creators. In this internet age, we are all both the consumers and the creators of the content that entertains, enriches, and informs us. But some of us feel compelled to create more of that content than others. Some of us treat the advent of the internet like the knowledge that Judy Garland's father owns a barn. We put on a show. With us today are Ryan Tabb, fresh out of Syracuse University, Tone Talk's David Friedman, Steve and Jeff Pollak from Radioactive, and joining us via Zoom video conference is the head of TLB TV and the host of Rebecca Sounds Reveille, Rebecca Mahan. Welcome. There you are.
Here I am.
Yay. And you're coming to us from Texas, correct?
I am.
Oh, nice.
We're going to open with Ryan, because I think I've known Ryan for quite a long time.
It's been a while.
Ryan's a veteran, a broadcaster, even though he is just newly minted from Syracuse University, where he was a graduate of the
the Newhouse School of Public Communications. Yeah, that's their journalism program that also has like PR and advertising and all that good stuff as well. Television.
Oh, cool. That's nice.
Yeah. And but Ryan is even at his young age is a veteran. He's been journalistically writing columns and putting on shows since he was a wee lad. Ryan grew up paneling on my previous podcast, Journals Out Loud, which you can find online.
Yeah, there's a lot of clips that I was going back through them a little while ago, and it's like a deep history of that, probably since I was 15
yeah.
or so. Yeah.
For the past 4 years, you've been at Syracuse learning things.
I hope so.
Learning more than I could ever
so.
teach you. And putting on shows. And so what... Do you guys have the link to Tabb Takes?
Yeah, that was my my solo sports radio show I did this past semester, which was kind of a challenge. And I told you before the show, right? Like doing a full hour by yourself, you realize it's so different than being able to play off of people and have other people fill the empty space when you don't have much to say. But to go for an hour straight is pretty challenging. But I really enjoyed learning how to do that this semester.
Well, as I said to you before the show, if you were to ask me... Of everyone you know, who would have the easiest time talking for an hour? I would have said Ryan Tabb without hesitation. So in Tabb Takes, well, is it a podcast or would it be on the Syracuse radio station? Where would folks find it?
So there's 3 campus radio stations at Syracuse, and I worked for WERW, which is where I hosted Tabb Takes. And so it would be a live show for an hour every Wednesday from 5 to 6, and then I would re-upload it to the internet afterwards. And I cut out some of the breaks that I took because we were required to play a certain amount of music during each show just to fund things. But I'd cut those out. Other than that, the podcast version of it is the same as the live take on air. So it's not modified or anything in that way.
And what were you taught at the college level about the changing landscape of broadcast, narrowcast, podcast, and your future?
The thing that's toughest about that is that there wasn't so much they could teach us because we're kind of in the middle of it right now and how everything's changing. And maybe saying we're in the middle of it is a little naive because things are constantly changing, but there's not a real answer to that. So it was hard for us to learn much more than the direction things are headed and no one really knows where things are going to end up. But there's certainly an emphasis being put on the online, the podcasting type of work and stuff that's really shifting from conventional media to kind of new age media.
But, just speaking broad strokes, anything that goes up on sort of like a old school radio antenna tower is being archived on the internet?
At least for the work I was doing, yeah. I recorded everything because if you just put it out there and it disappears, then it's just kind of gone after that. I don't like that feeling.
Right. I'm wondering if anywhere in terrestrial media they just do a show and then go home. Or do you guys know the answer to this? Is everything being saved somewhere?
Well, they have loggers in traditional radio, and they can go back. It's digital, so they can go back on it. And it wasn't until probably about 15 years ago that they started taking, before they had the term podcast, and they would record the shows and then put them on the websites of the stations, and so you archive them
Well, they
later.
had air checks too.
Yeah, air checks too. This is always standard.
I remember John and Ken on KFI. I used to listen to them a lot, and sometimes if something happened or like they couldn't for some reason make it, they would repeat an episode or they repeat an interview.
Well, but that was they had it. It
Yeah.
didn't mean anyone had access to it.
Oh, you're talking strictly about allowing the public to have access to
Yeah.
it. Oh,
Yeah.
okay. I thought you were asking if like people had recorded it before.
Yeah, I mean, I guess at every radio station they had their own policies. They would save it for however long,
Right.
and then probably why we don't have the first 10 years of Johnny Carson, they'd record over it or throw
Yeah.
it away or something. But I was just wondering if now everything is made available after the fact, so that it's appointment entertainment, no longer like, oh, I have to be in front of my radio at this certain time or I'm going to miss a thing. Is there a way to find everything?
Yeah, I think
yeah, most things are getting uploaded at this point, because that is appointment entertainment is exactly why things are trending in the podcast direction, because people want to be able to do it on their own terms. They don't want to
Yeah.
have to do it on somebody else's terms. And so time is really important to people. And if you can do it when you want, that's a big factor in it.
But
So-
I also think that there's this thing where it's like people still like the live aspect of it. So like listening to your radio show or like watching this show live is still, people still get the sense of like, oh, I'm seeing it fresh for the first time. I'm listening to it fresh for the first time. And then other people who can't watch it or listen to it are like, well, I can still catch the podcast. So it sort of, I feel like, plays with both mediums.
I think people get excited with anything live, because they could watch me stumble through the intro, and it's like,
I didn't
oh my
notice
God,
it.
I'm not her. This is a good day.
I thought you did great.
Shonda
I
Friday,
want to
right?
jump
Rebecca,
in too.
yeah.
Yeah, I want to jump in too. There is something called the Internet Archives, and just about anything that is on the internet can be still found. And if you go to Internet Archives, you can look back from things way back. It's a thing called the Wayback Machine.
Yeah, there is a
That's
Wayback
exactly
Machine.
what they call it.
Yeah.
That's just an old
Yes, and you can find things from a long time ago. Nothing is lost.
Yeah, and there's websites or there's like services that help you like clean up your search results if you've like been arrested or something. Like I think that like you spend like thousands of dollars for them to tell you to get a LinkedIn. Yeah, get a LinkedIn and an Etsy, and bump that arrest to the third page.
And also Sirius XM, their big thing with their latest version of their app, everything is archived. It's almost like you can listen to past shows. It's like listening to podcasts and shows on demand, minus the commercials. And now that they just recently acquired Pandora, they're now putting some of the programming from Pandora, or some of their programming now, bits and pieces on Pandora. So like shows like Jenny McCarthy, Dr. Laura, you can now listen to them on Pandora without the commercials, or sometimes they will drop separate commercials on there. You won't hear the live reads.
Does
and
it
stuff.
still do the thing where it like skips to different versions? So like you could hear a Dr. Laura show from like 2 months ago, and then a Dr. Laura show from like 3 years ago.
Shuffle?
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, no, you can actually you can they have an archive list of the shows that you want to listen to. Some are not
okay.
that far back, depending on the host. Some of them, like Dr. Laura, you can subscribe to her podcast and see ones that are like several months ago, but they leave on there about the last 45 days worth of programming.
Okay.
So
So Ryan also has, Tabb Takes is very binge worthy, correct? And
I
then-
mean, yeah, I'd like to think so.
Yeah, and then you also have the post game.
Right, which was a group show I did with two of my close friends and co-hosts at school. Essentially the same format as a sports talk radio show you'd catch on ESPN LA or any other sports station, but that was kind of the more conventional, multiple people on air discussing something route that I went, and I've been doing that for a year and a half. So
Does it focus on all sports or just a specific sport in general?
the post game focused a little bit more on Syracuse. It's hard to talk this way and see you,
sorry.
but the post game focused on more Syracuse University athletics. Although we did delve into a lot of national topics, and Tabb's Takes was more nationally focused.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. And we have David Friedman.
hello.
By way of full disclosure, the husband of our own Dina Friedman. David is the man behind the signature tones of rock icons Eddie Van Halen, Steve Stevens, and Jerry Cantrell. Dave has been building, modding, and repairing amplifiers for many of the world's biggest stars for the past 25 years. His company is called Friedman Amplification. Cut to link. And Dave, like a lot of people who are good at a thing, is now hosting his own podcast called Tone Talk with Mark Kozansky. So tell us a little bit about that, Dave.
What's funny, Tone Talk started because I was on a show that Mark was co-hosting, a different show, and he wound up leaving the show, and I sort of became friends with him beforehand. And I'm like, why did you leave the show? And, well, a whole lot of sordid details.
Gossip? Do tell.
Oh, that
That'll
goes
be
too
on
deep.
another
I love
podcast.
when AMP guys get into it.
And
Yeah, gossip tone talks. That's
And
a
so-
secondary
so
podcast.
I'm like, I've been doing this for so many years since since I was 18 years old. Pretty much been working in the
Jeez.
industry. So
and you're 21 now?
Yeah.
exactly,
Okay.
just 21.
Going on.
Imagine that. I diet this way. So I've worked with all sorts of artists over the years because before even amplifiers, I was making guitar systems and rigs for touring guitar players, and so I have a big, vast history. So, I just like, why don't we do a show? But here's the deal: I don't have time to do anything. You're going to be the host, and you have to book the guests, and I can help get the guests.
Wait, is that Mark talking to you?
No.
That's you
me
talking to Mark.
Yes.
Gotcha. What a diva.
So if you're willing to do all that, then
That's
I'm
kind of
in.
how this show works. I
I'm
do
in,
everything.
so
You guys show up, eat some pizza, and talk.
I was just going to say that. I was like, that's basically what I did.
The concept behind the show really was to have other amp designers, other different from different companies in the music, the music industry, artists, people behind the scenes, pretty much anyone that is associated with the music industry.
Yeah.
And we've done that. But it started off as, kind of just sit around and talk. Let's just have a conversation, and just like if you were sitting down and and sometimes we have cocktails while we do it too. So sometimes that gets out of hand, but
And your wife was saying that you guys have, how long do your shows sometimes go till?
the average show, well, anywhere from the smallest show, the shortest show would be an hour, but generally it's more like 2 hours to 4 hours.
Jeez.
Did you guys
That's
click on the
awesome.
link for Tone Talk? Because he's got it up on YouTube as well.
And is it strictly about like music and in the industry, or do you guys just talk about whatever's going on in your life?
It's mostly
or-
about the music or industry. So you're sort of interviewing or talking to your guests about what they've done, what their history is. Start us from the beginning.
Oh, that's
The
cool.
common line is, when did you realize you made a mistake with your career?
A lot of
But
regret.
generally speaking, everyone that works in this industry loves it. So
Yeah.
so even if they feel they've made a mistake, they still keep doing it.
Yeah.
So
But there's a lot of gear geeks out there, right?
yes, and the funny thing is, some of the 4-hour shows, people are like, "There's no way I'm going to watch 4 hours of this. No way." And then they start watching, and they tell me, they write me emails, and I'm like, I watched it all, or I listened to it all, because it's also on podcasts. So
Right.
It only goes 4 hours when your guest has a good chemistry,
Or if
Yeah.
you, or if you
Great
have that
chemistry.
much alcohol.
Yeah. Or too many cocktails.
Okay, yeah. But we've done some shows without alcohol that have been 4 hours too, so that kind of throws that out the window.
Yeah. It's just something you're passionate about.
Yeah.
So, all right,
That's really cool.
let's talk to Rebecca. And we have some links to share with you about Rebecca, because you can find her online. Rebecca Mahan, coming to us from Texas. What town in Texas are you in, Rebecca?
I live in a little town called Belton.
Oh, it sounds lovely.
Oh, cool.
So if it's a little town in Texas, then there's a lot of town talk, right?
Well, I don't go with little town talk. Everything is big in Texas.
Oh, okay.
Right?
All right, so what's the big town talk? What's the scandal? We can handle it.
I don't like to go with scandal. I like to help people move forward in everything that they do. So I'm all about inspiring people and keeping things in a positive
All right, if
motion.
you must be that way. Rebecca has created her own network, TLB TV. There it is. And this just seems like so industrious. How did you
Wow.
pull all of this together?
So really, the founder of the Liberty Beacon and CEO of TLBTV.com started a media company called the Liberty Beacon about 10 years ago, Roger Landry. And it is an extremely successful media company. It's ran on all volunteers. Right now, tlbtv.com is sort of put on hold due to the rapid expansion. We have just gone overwhelmingly with TV shows. And so we have to accommodate all of this. It's unbelievable growth in a really short period of time, which is really exciting for us. And well, how it started for me is because I had a message to get out. My expertise is in domestic violence and helping people overcome trauma. So that goes with my forward thinking talk and messages that I share in helping people move forward. And so I originally started sharing my message by going into radio and trying to promote a book. And I fell in love with radio, started a radio show, and it eventually led to my TV show called Rebecca Sounds Reveille. And it went on to helping other people start their own shows. And so this has really just become absolutely crazy wonderful. And so that's what I do. I love to help people. And so now my show is just starting to take off on all kinds of other forums and platforms as well.
That is so exciting. And let's talk a little bit about Rebecca Sounds Reveille. That's your own show.
It is.
Upon which I have been a guest.
Yes, and I loved it. It was a fantastic show.
Yeah, it was my favorite episode.
Of course it is. You were so savvy on the show too, because you knew everything about what to do. You were really savvy when it comes to technology and specifically about what goes on with content creation.
Oh, thank you. That's quite a nice compliment. How do you go about finding your guests?
Well, this is something that is a lot of work for many people, including myself and probably everyone here on the panel, and along with everybody who does a show, because you can start with people that you know, but to have a long-running successful show, you have to really be out there talking to people, and you have to be, on the net. You have to really develop a good network and always be talking to people and gaining relationships, because really good content and good shows are about creating a good rapport with people and developing a good relationship prior to a show even being done.
Mm-hmm. So it's all about outreach, networking, and people helping people, which is what you set out starting to do anyway.
Absolutely, it is.
That's cool.
With us, we also have here in the studio Steve and Jeff Pollak. Are you two related? Or just have the same name by happenstance?
Right. Yeah, it's coincidental.
Who's the okay? Get close to the microphone.
Okay.
Who's the older brother?
That's for you to guess.
Steve, is it you?
Yes, it is.
Were you a good older brother, or were you
how far different older?
Yeah, how many years apart?
You tell us.
I would say you're
5 minutes.
27 and then you're 25.
There you go.
That's right.
All right, you have to talk into the mic too, young Jeff.
We're 3 years apart.
3 years apart. So was it a good brother relationship, or was there? I mean, did you imagine that one day you'd be working together?
Well, we didn't actually, but then we always wanted to do something together, and we've been working together for the last 11 years, and we have varied backgrounds. We both have a common background of doing some kind of sales, and I started off I got a degree in film and television, and I fell into radio. Even though I got a degree in film, television, and radio, I took one class in my undergraduate career at Long Beach in radio, and little did I ever think I was going to fall into radio, which is what the majority of my career has been, is working at various radio networks and stations and eventually having my own agency.
All right, so you guys have a company called Radioactive Media, and we can click on that link. Radioactive Media has led the way in developing original sponsored podcasts and radio programs for their clients. Unlike infomercials, their programming is honest, engaging, and polished. You also embed brands into podcasts and radio shows, and we're wondering how that works. For example, I would like some free coffee. I mean, is that how it works?
Go on, Jeff.
Because I did it really
Well,
conversationally. I was like,
First of all, it's about finding a host that really
Enjoys
has
coffee.
a match. There's a synergy between the host likes and it's like has a hot button issue is what I say. They really have a love for the product or service.
anyway, so it feels natural when
Feels
they talk
natural.
about the coffee lovingly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, it's also good that on a podcast you don't reference what kind of coffee or where the coffee where you got.
Oh no, this is Starbucks coffee.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I thought you were gonna keep it vague and just let all the coffees come to you.
Well, I'm open, Coffee Bean. I'm not dating only one coffee until you put a ring on it.
There you go.
So you guys explain what you do, because it seems like everyone else here, and I'm going out on a limb because Rebecca, you could be like making boatloads of cash down there in Texas, but like a lot of podcasters here in Los Angeles are doing it sort of free of charge or actually spending money to make a show. But you guys have figured out how to make money in this space. So we want to hear more about that.
Well, it started with years ago when I was working at CBS, and I found clients that wanted to have their own radio show, but didn't want to have a show that that was basically an infomercial. And that's the worst thing that happens at radio stations nowadays. Is like on the weekends, it's like a graveyard for sponsors.
So we call it pay for play.
That's right. And so what I did is I created programs for clients like Expedia, E-Trade, and the programming was developed around them, just like the old days of radio where they had the Texaco, entertainment hour. It wasn't about gasoline the whole time, right? It would just happen to be brought to you by Texaco when Milton Berle had a show like that. So we developed programming like for Expedia that was all about travel. Did another show for a client called A Touch of Romance, which has a chain of adult stores. And then it was a sex advice show. And then we've done that same thing, jump forward in time, or we're calling them podcasts now on demand. And we do that for a lot of our clients. We create original programming that's not so much in your face, but we find an expert about a topic, so and have them talk about what their services and such are, and we have commercials that are embedded in the programming. The other thing that we also do is we also put traditional advertising on radio shows and podcasts that match the needs and the desires of the different hosts and of our clients, so that we get results.
Our show is called Things I Found Online.
Right.
We could be brought to you by Google,
Right.
or Yahoo, or
Exactly.
Or Bing.
Bing.
Yeah.
Dang.
Yeah.
But probably not.
Well, anything that you find online would be more easy to fit. You could just slot us in anywhere.
Right.
So basically, you if somebody comes to you and says, "Hey, I want to do a show. I have an expertise in peanut butter," and you're like, "Well, great. We have Jiffy as our one of our products. You can do a peanut butter podcast." Or if somebody comes to you and says, "I have a peanut butter podcast. Can you put ads on it?" Is that more of what you do, or is it both?
Yeah,
things?
both. Well, sometimes it's a chicken and the egg type of thing. We either have a client that has that wants to do their own radio show, and then we go out and find an advertiser for them that will match, be a natural fit, or it might be the other way around, where we have advertisers that are looking for the appropriate podcast to reach their desired audience.
So sometimes the show host comes to you, and it could be a vanity thing where it's like, I just like I'm a nice lady and I want a show.
Yeah.
And if they come to you, with a bucket of money, you're like, okay, for this amount of money, I will make you a show.
Right.
Oh,
and then
okay.
and then will you coach them? And,
Oh yeah, definitely, and produce them just like what
Not everyone is meant to be a host. Got to really coach them. We want to make good listening.
Right.
We want to engage you. We want to make it so the person actually, the listeners want to hear it. You don't want to just have someone that meanders on and talks and talks and talks and doesn't get to the point.
Right. Well, I mean, I think a lot of people have interests in like music or whatever. They may not be that good, but they could get better within their own skill set, like with sports or whatever. Like if you pitch me 100 balls, I'm going to get better at hitting a ball. I won't join the major leagues, but if they have an interest in it, they should get to do it if they want to do it and be willing to learn.
Exactly.
Oh yeah.
This is brilliant, though, because like you said, Louise, at the very beginning, not a lot of podcasters or those who do online shows make money with what they're doing. Most people pay for either airtime or broadcast time, or they're investing their own funds to get their shows out there.
Right. But for a lot of people, a show is looked at nowadays is sort of like a book. It's something that you get to hold up and say, hey, I wrote a book. Hey, I have a podcast. It's like cachet. It's like, these are my credentials. and for branding, or for just even if it's, I don't want to use the word vanity, because anyone who ever wrote a book wrote it because they wanted people to read it. So what is vanity other than I didn't find a publisher, but I would like to share my book. So now with the internet, everybody can be an author, a columnist, a radio host, a TV host. They can make their own movies. They can get it out there, but it's just a matter of, since everybody can do it, how do you make yours stand out, or how do you improve at what you're doing so that it doesn't feel like you did it yourself?
Right.
Yeah. Although I will say that one of the things I think is interesting is that it's sort of like, because a lot of things with certain podcasts, it's like sports or music, it's niche, but it's also like, so you're basically kind of taking it and you're saying, we already want it to be packaged for an advertiser. Whereas like certain podcasts kind of find their voice and then they go for advertising. So do you think it kind of stops people from being able to find their voice a little bit, as far as like, because now they already have this advertiser, so they have to kind of keep with what the advertiser wants them to do?
Yeah, it's one of those things that we try not to have the podcaster, dictate the terms and change their style, because it has to be a natural fit. It has to, work together. We don't want a host to like all of a sudden change something because of the advertiser. It should be a natural fit where they could work, cohesively. Yeah, we met with somebody today, and they one of our clients who is in the financial realm, and they're doing some podcasting, sponsoring some major radio programs and podcasts, and we're actually helping them maybe extend to do their own podcast, where it's not going to sound like an infomercial. It's a more advice show and talking about about financial investment. So it has to be, and they may have other advertisers that may want to jump on board that are not a conflict to their business.
Yeah.
So
it's finding a way to merge sales with content in a natural way, so that it's something people want to consume. It's like those ads that come on the Super Bowl where you're like, suddenly you want to see the ad. You're not fast forwarding through the ad. You're
exactly.
Like, yeah.
Oh, this is interesting.
Engaged.
Oh, okay.
It's almost like, like on our show, it's people like it because it's not very corporate. It's very kind of lo-fi, shall we say, but it's like you're having a conversation at a bar with this person, and that's what they love about it. Yep.
But do you seek free gear? Do you say, "Hey, Fender, we're going to hold up one of your guitars"?
No, it's more about it's almost some of these people that we've interviewed, and some of these famous amp designers and things that are well known in the industry. It's almost like archiving what their story is, because they're not going to be around forever. A lot of them are older, and it's not going to be. They're not going to be here forever.
Have you ever met Les Paul?
No.
Oh, that would be cool.
Unfortunately,
It sounds like a win-win for a lot of people.
All right, it absolutely is, Rebecca. That's the perfect term. We're gonna break for commercial. Please enjoy this brief commercial break.
In the magical world of Hoth, there are wizards, there are sorcerers, and there are magi. And none of them know what they're doing.
That's how the best spells are discovered. Throw it at the wall and read the tea leaves. Or scorch marks.
Witness the wonders of magic, science, and property damage in a radio drama of phantasmical proportions.
Face my mastery over the elements!
Magus Ilgar. Now available for download wherever audiobooks are sold. Listen to the first 3 episodes for free on YouTube.
I'm Michael, the host of the semi-monthly podcast In a City Like Yours. Join me as I chat with interesting people with interesting life stories. You can listen to the podcast on all major podcast platforms, including Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. You can follow us on Twitter at IACLYS Podcast, as well as on Facebook and Instagram at In a City Like Yours Podcast. Please feel free to let me know what you think, and keep coming back for the many interesting stories in a city like yours.
Excellent. Now, Laura, you have also hosted your own podcast or co-hosted your own podcast.
Yes, I'm actually on several other podcasts. I'm sorry. But
rattle them off.
I do Hello Uglies, which is a recap show for a drag show called Dragula. I do Fat Camp, which is me and my friend Joe talk about our struggles with weight loss. I do Camp Wanakiki recap show, which is another drag show called Camp Wanakiki, so it's pretty self-explanatory. I do Bloody Podcast, which is a show about female killers in history and folklore. And I also am starting a new podcast that's going to be released this Friday called Fraternal Flicks, and it's about movies that come out in the same year that have the same plot. So kind of like Armageddon and Deep Impact, and we talk about like how those movies kind of are the same and how they cross paths and stuff like that.
You are overly ambitious. I think you're fighting above your weight right here. Yes. That's a lot of podcasts. So where do you do them? Do you do them in your living room? Like, how does it work? Because here we're in a studio where there's a bedroom in my home devoted to this enterprise. Well, how do you do it?
So I actually only had one podcast for the longest time. Well, two, including this
Slacker.
one. Because it was a trek. I live in Orange County, and so it was a trek to drive to LA. And that's where I do Bloody Podcast with my co-host Maria. So I was just kind of like, I'm fine with that one. But then I had gotten this software called Audio Hijack, which allows me to record in one, like essentially what we're doing with from Zoom
with Rebecca today. Yes.
Yeah. So that really kind of like opened up a new door as far as that. So now it's just kind of like trying to my friend Maria and I are trying to start a podcast network and trying to find people to essentially like promote the podcast, and we're trying to get sponsorships and stuff.
Does it feel like networking is the way to go for podcasts?
Definitely.
To join forces with other podcasts? Because we've recently joined a network.
Yeah, definitely to join because it sort of like allows people to promote, because like different things have different niches, you know? So like, I also do another podcast called Queering Time and Space, but it's about queer history. Oh my God. But so it's like, so people who listen to queer history might not listen to about, killer women. And so they could be like, I might want to give that a try. Or they might not, people who listen to drag might not listen about movies.
Do you promote your other podcasts within your podcast? Like we just did in City Like Yours?
Yes. I do that. It does feel very like self-aggrandizing when I go like, hey, listen to the list of podcasts that I'm on. So I try and have like the people I do the co-host with do it. I will say that I'm at the point now where I feel like I need to cut bait a little bit as far as like I like the idea of different things spark my interest, and like I like listening to podcasts. I like doing podcasts. I love the niche thing. I love, I listen to sports podcasts. I am not a sports person. I just like hearing people's opinions about sports. Mm-hmm. So I do like that kind of stuff. It's just that like at this point in time, I'm like, I feel like I need to find something that's going to like move me forward, because it's like I could create podcasts till the cows come home, but it's like, what's going to actually like help me make money and help me move forward in a career.
That's where they come in.
Yeah.
I'm going to make a podcast about the cows coming home, because I don't think any of us have enough information about exactly what time they do come home.
No, they're very late. They're very,
It's late.
Yeah.
That's all we know.
Yeah.
All right. So if people meet you at a party, Steve and Jeff, and they're, hey, Steve and Jeff, are you guys brothers? That's probably the first thing. Just like it was my opening question. Like, are you guys brothers? Because you have the same last name. And just a initial inquiry. And then the second would be, how do I make money on my podcast? And then what do you guys say?
Well, we ask them what it's about.
Okay.
And
it's about the cows coming home.
It's about the cows coming home. And who do they figure is their target audience?
Are there cows?
Yeah,
cows.
Farmers. People who are waiting for cows to come home.
People who are up late.
The sheep who are being
people
counted.
waiting for cows.
What makes you listen worthiness? What's your listening worthiness?
I'm adorable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's just
Is
such
that more of a visual thing?
I meant my
audio?
personality.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. No, my show's about the internet, and so it's for anybody who's ever been on the internet. And
It's funny you were asking us about, coaching. One of the things we actually look for is someone who's going to listen. because a lot of times you start someone out on a podcast, a radio show, and they listen to you initially, but then they think about 3 or 4 shows in, they got handled. They don't listen to you, and they don't heed your advice, and it really is a detriment towards the podcast, because some of the things that you could advise them on would actually make the podcast a lot more desirable for people to listen to.
So you want coachable.
Yeah.
Coachable, and somebody that can listen to their guests and to their fans that are listening, because you'll find that when you have a show, you get a lot of feedback from people on social media, or if you're also over the air, people call in.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that? I wasn't paying attention.
You wasn't paying attention.
I'm kidding.
Yeah. Very funny.
Yeah, getting involved in social media. Really, a host has to be involved in social
Yeah,
media.
no, those are
Rebecca's
great.
Like Rebecca's all
Those are
over
great
it.
points.
Like, she's got that part down.
Oh yeah, you have to be involved. That is what the climate is right now, and it is essential that you are involved on social media and you follow the platforms where people are at. And if you are not following it and not involved, you really are missing the boat on a lot of things. And I found there was one particular platform that I wasn't doing because I wasn't skilled.
Which one was it?
And so I had to get on the boat with this.
Which one?
And I'm still even technically challenged in this area, but I'm forcing myself to do this because it is the thing.
Is it Snapchat? Because I'm still kind of like holding on it.
No, it's Instagram.
Oh, Instagram.
Oh, yeah.
Instagram.
Oh, yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
because
That
I
one's important.
am more interactive than just putting a photo up. But there's actually more to it than that. And
There
I have to get on board with this.
They all have their personalities, and I just want to throw to Ryan for a moment, because you just graduated from college, so you're here and you've been embedded in the college environment for 4 years. Like, what is, because I know that social platforms change constantly. Like, what are people currently? What do you have to be on in order to exist as a 22-year-old?
Instagram right now.
Okay.
Okay.
The biggest things, it was Snapchat for a while, and then Instagram just added Snapchat to Instagram.
Like years.
Like, yeah, they
Okay.
just, I mean, because Snapchat was the idea of like you post a 24-hour story, and Snapchat has died down in like the individual communications that disappear, and it's really about that story you build for 24 hours, but Instagram just added that feature. And so Snapchat's still fun and useful, but I think Instagram is where everything comes together.
Didn't Instagram also kill Boomerang by putting in?
Yes.
Like they
No,
just.
Snapchat did.
Oh, Snapchat killed Boomerang?
Yeah.
Like
Snapchat killed Vine.
Oh, Snapchat killed Vine. That's right.
I think, yeah.
Yeah.
But that was less.
And then also Instagram as well killed Vine.
Yeah, but that Vine was less of like a social media as far as promoting things. It was more of like a creative space.
Also,
Yeah.
there's another thing called TikTok, which is sort of like.
Oh, no.
Replacing Vine.
Which
But
is sort of
I
replacing
don't
Vine.
Yeah, I don't
think TikTok is
Yeah.
really in that region.
I don't think that's going to go. I don't think that that's going to go. And all of the guests that I've had appearing on my shows, especially that are celebrities, they are telling me Instagram, Instagram, Instagram.
Yeah, I've heard Instagram is.
Because Instagram was a more permanent application, I think. So where Facebook had the permanence that now older generations have moved on to Facebook, and so like younger people have been trying to get off of it. Instagram had that permanence with like photos you post and posts you make, and then Snapchat had the momentary grasp, but then Instagram introduced that feature, so it has both things going for it. I think that's why it's such a powerful interface.
Give us like a little bit of an Instagram lesson, because it seems like, you know, when you talk to a young person, you find out like, oh yeah, no, hashtags are just so last year. Like you really need to tag everything. Like, so what are your Instagram practices that you think are good practices?
Yeah, I don't try and clutter things with hashtags. I think one of the best ways, especially like with live stories, if you're saying like, oh, hey, we're about to go live, like check us out. The link will be in the bio or whatever. You can put the hashtags in there, zoom them down really small, make them the same color or something in the background, because as long as they're in there and then someone else is on that hashtag, your clip will still pop up. They won't necessarily go to the hashtag from your clip, but you don't really care about feeding back into that system. I mean, if you really want to be a good person, I guess you do. But as far as just benefiting your show, you just care that you're getting the viewers. You don't necessarily
Ryan,
have to send them the
Have you
other
been paying
way.
attention? Rebecca would like to be a good person.
That's true.
Yes,
Rebecca,
exactly.
Rebecca would,
But
and so she can
I
put it
will
right
tell
there.
you, in this, here I thought I was kind of getting on board with this whole Instagram thing, and I got on my laptop and I'm thinking I'm ready to promote, this guest that I have, and I am frustrated as heck because I can't get this banner to go out, and come to find out you have to do it from your phone.
Yeah. Instagram for like your laptop is much more limited than it is for your phone application.
Right. Even though like hearts are so tiny.
Yeah. One thing I will say too is I've learned is to get people to see your thing is not necessarily hashtags, but to put where you are, because a lot of times people will like look at like places and they'll kind of see other posts that people have placed. So like, and it also allows you to open up to a wider variety, because the hashtag is very specific. If you're clicking on that hashtag, you're into whatever that hashtag is. Whereas if you're clicking on the location, you're just looking at people who are posting at that location.
Right. And
now, hashtags though, Twitter is it.
Yeah, Twitter hashtags
Twitter's
are much
the thing
more
when it comes
important.
to hashtags.
But don't do more than one or two, like on Twitter, or it looks.
Yeah, and then it starts to feel like you're just grasping at everything you can to try.
It becomes hard to read if the eye is interrupted by all these like little coded messages.
If it's like a full sentence, it's like just tweet that.
Yeah. So what my technique is like I hired a social media manager. Dina Friedman.
Oh, okay.
Because I just get, I do my best at social media, but I just get overwhelmed. Like I'm not doing it perfectly properly.
I have a question for Ryan. Is now you have two of the sports podcasts. Is like sports broadcasting? Is that what you want to get into? Is that your
sports talk radio? I like talk radio. I like commenting on things that we see in society. I like having opinions and trying. I'm also a philosophy minor. I really like taking deep dives into things and challenging my ideas and other people's ideas. But I really like sports too, and I think people don't always realize how much of that you can do within sports, because a lot of times it's discussion of athletes, and athletes make mistakes, and you have to try and say, well, is this something we can move past, or is that overstepping a boundary? And then you're more talking morals and philosophical ideas, and it's less about actual football and basketball, and that's what intrigues me so much, in particular about sports, because you can do all that as well.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
So how do you like, what was your goal with these podcasts? Was your goal to kind of like just sort of like start it and see what happens, or is this something like, would you want Tabb's Takes to be like a thing that like goes out
the
there?
Dream is that Fox Sports Radio picks up Tabb's Takes one day, right? Like they have Colin Cowherd does The Herd, right? And that's his radio show. Like that would be the dream. So it was my senior year of college, and I really had to get things going, and I've been doing it since my junior year, but to double up on the shows, it was building a reel and building a portfolio and practicing too, because a lot of this, I think all of us could probably, and you included obviously with the 1,000 podcasts you do, could attest to how much practice does really make perfect.
Lori has a lot of podcasts. I want to just sort of ask the panel, Doug, do you guys host your own shows at all?
No, not at the present time. We're thinking about doing something.
Yeah, I think you guys look like brothers.
The Doling brothers.
Yeah. You know,
media mavens.
We did mention a podcast about cows coming home.
Right.
I don't know if that's something.
That's cool.
Yeah.
It'll be another one for you to start.
Yeah. There you go. We've got our tagline. Let's hashtag that. So the people that have shows, like how has that helped you as a communicator in general life?
I know it sounds hard to believe, but it's made me get to the point faster, even though I still tend to ramble sometimes. But I feel like as somebody who's done so many podcasts, I tend to, my way I tell stories is like, well, first you have to hear what I was doing that day. So it's like, now I'm like, no, I think we can just get to it.
We don't need the backstory.
Yeah. So
You're
also it's giving me more confidence as far as like just communicating with people.
Yeah. And land the soundbite, I think, is something that you learn how to do.
Yeah.
I mean, I have a lot of thoughts a lot of the time, and they come really quickly. And so one thing I've learned is just chaos is the single worst thing you can have on an audio-centric like platform, because as a listener, you just get lost in it and you stop listening. So I kind of communicate chaotically, but having a show and having to cut that out has developed my ability just in conversation to almost feel like I'm still doing it for an audience, because there's someone else you're communicating with, whether it's one person or 1,000 people. You have to figure out a way to communicate clearly and effectively. So I think it helped me kind of screen my thoughts a little bit better and be more smooth with the way I communicate.
I like that. Dave?
Yeah, I think when you have guests and they tend to sometimes ramble, you learn quickly how to try to move them along. So I just like both of these guys said, you've learned to be more concise with your points and get to them quickly, because otherwise they go forever and you can't even get past. Your show will never end. And at 4 hours, I guess our shows don't.
Yeah. Mr. Springsteen of podcast.
So maybe we haven't learned, actually.
Yeah,
We should
I love
learn to be even more concise.
I would love to see what not concise looks
Yes,
like.
exactly.
I think it's made me a more confident communicator. So if there's some event where I'm asked to get up and speak, it's no longer like, oh my God, I can't possibly do that. It's just like, okay.
Yeah.
You're not shy about having to speak in front of people.
Yeah, my fear was always that I would say start a sentence and I wouldn't know where I was going to go with it, and then I would just be like, well, I don't know where that went. And I've done that several times on many of my different podcasts, and it's just been like, yeah, just move on.
I mean, I've noticed that you really have that ability. Like, you'll launch into something and you'll always land it.
Yeah.
Like, sometimes I'll be like, I don't know. And then, you pull it in for a landing. So, yeah, it's just like, because it's like, I know I'm smart.
I bring the cows home,
You bring those cows home. Rebecca, how about you?
Well, I think communication also has to do with the listening skills too, because if you have guests on the show, you really have to listen to what they're trying to convey so that you can carry the conversation and also move the conversation into the direction to keep the theme of the show or the content where you need it to go, especially if you're on a time schedule. So really listening skills are there, and then being able to convey what you want to get across, not only to your guests, but to the audience.
Interesting. So you're the band leader and it's like, oh, we're jamming, but I'm the one that's going to have to get us to end at the same time.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
What are the biggest challenges in hosting shows that you find? Rebecca?
Oh, okay. In hosting shows is ensuring that your guest is going to make it there.
It really is, right? That's like up to the last minute. You're just like my husband will be like, well, who's coming? And I'm like, I can tell you who came in 3 hours. I cannot tell you who's coming.
Yeah, if you have a show, especially if it's going to be a live show and they don't show, you either have to carry that yourself and make sure that you can deliver, or you have to cancel the show.
Yeah.
And that isn't good because you have an audience that has an expectation from you.
Mm-hmm.
And you can lose a lot of audience members if you don't deliver.
I remember when I was first starting out in show business, I was a page. And I worked for a talk show called The John Davidson Show. And John Davidson had taken over the Mike Douglas Show. And he was the new host of the... So there was there were people called talent coordinators, and their job was to book the guests. And there was one named Sally. I wish I could. She was a character. I can't remember her last name, but she would wear a cardigan, and this was when you could still smoke indoors. And she would just smoke and pace. And she was basically waiting for the phone to ring to see if she could make sure that Betty White was coming, And it was like the more she smoked and paced, it was like the more you realized, like, oh, we don't have any guests for this afternoon. But like that was.
Your freak out.
Just absolutely nerve-wracking because it all depended on her. Like, can you land these guests?
But I think that also gives you like a way to deal with it on a lower level. And then when you reach that higher level, you realize the stress because with that show, that was a higher level show. Whereas like now, like with the podcast I have, when I deal with that stress of like a guest has canceled, so what do we do?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like now I feel like you're learning, you're cutting your teeth more. Like Ryan was saying about his shows, you cut your teeth and you get a reel and you kind of show, and then you take it to the next level. So you're sort of honing your craft earlier and earlier.
That's right. You didn't have a chance to do that unless you were Joe Cipriano and you built a radio station in your bedroom when you're 14, which is what he did.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I mean, it spanned the entire block. The listening radius was...
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, but yeah, it was harder. People got on shortwave radios or whatever, but it was harder to put on a show unless your dad had a barn,
Yeah, yeah.
But... now any kid can turn on their computer and she can edit her own music, she can broadcast, she can write a column, she can do animation. There's just so much that technology allows, like the thoughts inside your head to become an actual thing.
Well, I remember as a kid, I remember I was probably about 10 years old, and our dad had bought us a stereo set that had a cassette recorder.
Yeah.
And so we'd have our friends over, and we'd make our own little like radio shows on tape. And years later, we found these cassettes. Of course, they were all insulting to our younger cousin. And we'd have we'd play little music in the background. We were pretending we were on radio and everything. But nowadays, kids that do that, like Jeff's daughter, she does that, and she's making her own little Instagram video shows in a moment's notice. The way we used to make things with a cassette recorder.
Yeah.
You know, it's just unbelievable what they have today.
The technology.
Yeah.
And I would
that would be the other dilemma is if there's no if there's a technical challenge, audio feed isn't working right, your video feed isn't working.
I would definitely list that as one of my challenges because we've got to cut to the shot of you guys. Lane and Franny are in the booth, and so you can see. I don't know if you can see the circuitry that's going on there, but like. Yeah, if something isn't working, you have to kind of like trace a chord to its origins.
Can I say my dad came to the last week's podcast?
How cute is he?
He's a cute little feller.
Yeah.
And he, I thought he was going to be like, oh, this looks like a great setup. I'm so proud of you. We get in the car and he goes, boy, a lot of wires.
And this is actually cleaned up since it was in journals. Remember, Ryan? Like there could have been the Lindbergh baby underneath all those quotes.
There were days when you would get up and you'd trip over cables just trying to get out the door. And someone else's chair would be yanked over. You'd pull someone's headphones off their head while you were talking.
Or like somebody be like, oh, I have to go get no, you're not moving.
Yeah. Once you sat down,
for the next hour.
it was like getting on a plane and there was a deboarding process at the end. And
we move you out one at a time so that we don't strangle anybody. Now, this is a question for you guys. Is promotion more important than content?
They go hand in hand.
Yeah.
Really, if you don't have good content, what do you have to promote?
Oh my gosh, Jeff. You need to just embroider things into my T-shirts. Follow me around.
That's the brilliant statement.
There's some of the biggest podcast hosts, like a Joe Rogan, who's like the top of his game.
Yeah.
He's a great host, right? And sometimes his show will go almost longer than 4 hours, and he's rambling on and on and on, and you wonder how much of his audience is still with him, and but at the same time, he does great promoting of his programs on YouTube and everywhere, and he's a compelling figure, and he's very humorous and has a huge following. Just almost in the last 3 years.
We could do a whole thing about him because he's so smart in that he allows for like longer podcasts, but then on YouTube he'll cut it up into like 5-10 minute chunks so people can watch it. So it's like, hey, you might not have wanted to see the whole thing, but you get like this little tidbit and stuff.
One of the things that I think is making it possible or even like wise for shows to be that long is the on-demand nature of it. So when you get to work, you pause it, and when you get back in your car, it picks up where you left off. It used to be you'd sit in your car, waiting to find out what Dr. Laura was going to say to somebody because it's like, what was going to happen to Hannah and the twins, once her husband had cheated on her.
Right.
You just couldn't get out of your car until you found out.
Yeah.
Right.
with Joe Rogan in particular, just on the length of it, I don't think I've ever watched one of his podcasts, but I've watched hundreds of clips from them.
Yeah.
So that's like someone who I would never watch, but because he's able to chop it up like you mentioned, he just added a new viewer in a different medium.
So in other words, it's bite size.
It's bite size. Yeah. It's I think it's really smart because you're allowing for both, because I think that a lot of people constantly are saying like with technology going forward, people want smaller and smaller, more compact things, and I don't think that's necessarily true. I think you will always have the one end that wants 4-hour stuff. They want to be able to just binge something. And then I think you have the other end that's like, give it to me in the smallest incremental bite ever. So I think if you can kind of, have both sides, then you're winning already.
Wow, that's interesting. Do you think it's an age thing? Like younger people want just I want it to be the length of a YouTube video, and then I want it to be like vaudeville. I want the act to keep changing, or the real fan just wants the conversation to go on forever. And when I get back into my car, I want this conversation to still be ongoing.
Yeah.
I think it depends how invested you are.
I think there's an audience for podcasts. There's a portion of the audience that really looks to podcasts to feel like they're hanging out with some friends. Like that's their preferred podcast experience. They don't care how long it is, like Joe Rogan or Dave's show, whatever. They like feeling like they're hanging out in somebody's house, like listening to a conversation and not having to be a part of it.
Yeah. I mean, they're hanging out with a celebrity, so it's depending on who you have on the show.
Right.
Or they're hanging out with someone that they think is sort of a celebrity or someone that they idolize or something.
I definitely fall into that realm. Like, that's what my podcasts I listen to are, like, all conversational, and it's about other cool stuff, but it's like My Favorite Murder is a great example. It's like, I like the content, but what's really keeping me coming back is that it's like two people who you can tell are like really good friends. Yeah. And they like love making jokes with each other, and it's like that's what I'm going back for. They could be talking about anything, really. I don't really care.
Right. But isn't like maybe like the common denominator that there are people that you kind of wish you were friends with, or that it would be cool if you it'd be fine if they were coming over that afternoon, you'd be like, yeah, that'd be great.
It's like YouTube and podcasts are the two things where it's like that melding of accessibility and celebrity, where there's like these celebrities, but they're not living celebrity lives. Like YouTubers, for the most part, except for the top end, are just like normal people. So you can relate to them, and then they also, you see them every day, and you put them on that pedestal. So they're like that perfect meld of like relatability and like, oh my God, I can't believe, like you're still a little starstruck by it. So it's like, that's
or
like,
they're just telling such a good story, like in This American Life. It's like, I don't really need Ira Glass to come over. That'd be great if he did. I'd make him some coffee. But I mean, he's telling me like a fascinating story.
I feel like young people, and I don't know if Ryan and Lane can speak to this for a minute. Young people have grown up in like the internet bubble where they're always they're like alone when they consume content, like looking at Instagram or Snapchat, whatever, on their phone. So it sort of makes sense to kind of be like not with your friends. I mean, not necessarily with your friends, but like being part of a conversation that is just like you're alone, like consuming it.
And don't you also think, Dina, that in terms of what mood it elicits, that Instagram can make a person feel sad? It can make you feel sad and left out, Facebook or Instagram, scrolling through it and seeing what other people are doing. But listening to a podcast, generally, we choose one that makes us feel included.
For me, the thing about a podcast or a radio show is not even that inclusion. It's like, I feel kind of vindicated, because when it's a debate-oriented thing, like I have an opinion and I'm waiting for somebody to say what I want to be, what I would say if I was there, and then I'm like, yes, that's my guy. I agree with him. Like he said what had to be said.
In
the other
Pod
guy's
Save, that
wrong.
happens a lot.
So that for me is like the best part, is to feel like someone made my point for me.
So this is
go ahead, Rebecca.
A quick question. This is for the younger panelists. There is a new thing where people are tuning in to some of the audio banter that's going back and forth from gamers and on YouTube.
Twitch and stuff, yeah.
And it's a big thing now. It's much like what podcasting is, but it's just the audio between gamers.
Mm-hmm. Oh, so
I
it's
haven't
not
heard
Twitch.
about that, but that's interesting.
It's
I
on
can see
Twitch.
It is Twitch. Okay.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's almost like they're talking to each other, like listening to air traffic control. You know, but they're
so
playing
they feel
a game.
like they're backstage and hearing all the.
Like,
you know what's crazy to me is that there's a UFC fighter who now switched to a different league, but he is like one of the greatest fighters in the world, and he actually makes more money as a Twitch player than he does as a fighter.
Interesting.
I mean, it's a huge. I mean, all the kids at my high school, they watch hours and hours of video of people playing games. Sometimes they'll have like actual conversations and do stuff, and they'll just be playing a game. So it's basically like a podcast.
Mm-hmm.
So
yes.
So with all the content that there is out there, where do you guys go to find what would interest you most? Like, how do you curate your listening list? Ryan?
Well, for me in particular, a lot of it's on YouTube when it's like new stuff that I'm coming across.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as, because most of what I'm interested in sports, there's still major players in like in like traditional media formats that provide me with that. So like it's just going to be radio or like ESPN.com or FoxSports.com. But YouTube is like, I do have like a techie side and like a science side that I like to explore. YouTube's where I discover a lot of newer content in that area.
Mm-hmm. What about you, Dave?
Most of the content I don't participate in, actually.
So you're not really.
I'm not a I though do a video podcast.
So what do you watch TV? Like, how do you guys watch TV at home?
I'm working so much that most of the time I'm not. But I do consume some YouTube content and other videos of. So I guess that would be the content I.
Do you still do message boards?
It's pretty much died down now. I'm so much on the internet answering emails from my company and private messages and things all over the places.
You're always working.
And then I do watch product videos and things that are shown on YouTube and things like that, or some
And Grey's
content that
Anatomy.
might some content that might interest me on
we got to
on
talk about
YouTube
Grey's
that I stumble
Anatomy
upon.
later.
How about you guys? How do you find what interests you?
Google it.
Hey, Google it.
Google it.
Are we here about trends? We hear about trends.
But are you guys looking
I
for
hear about it from our kids, actually.
Oh,
yeah, I hear about a lot of it. Right?
How old are your kids?
I've got a 15-year-old and a 9-year-old.
Oh, wow.
So
you
I
got
learn-
both ends of the spectrum,
At
kind
both
of.
ends, and some of the they have their YouTubers that they follow, and that's where I find out a lot of it. Which I'm grandpa,
No. No, but are you looking for things that would be of interest professionally, or are you looking for things that would entertain you?
Both.
Both.
Yeah, and things that are the newest trends. Find out what where things are going.
Right. So as an industry insider, it's of particular interest because it's your field, not just something that you want to take a long drive and listen to episodes of.
Right.
Yeah.
Has there ever been something that you found that you guys Googled and you didn't know anything about, and then now you're like, I love everything about this?
Well, what about Squatty Potty?
Oh my God.
Squatty Potty was one of our clients.
I love Squatty Potty.
We heard Howard Stern talking about it, and we ended up calling them up, and we helped make Squatty Potty a household name on radio.
Oh, describe.
Okay, so there wasn't a Squatty Potty podcast. That's what I was going to ask, right? That wasn't how that went.
So describe what is Squatty Potty for those that don't know.
It's a toilet stool that helps you go better. It helps you put in the right colorectal position so things flow.
Yeah.
And this is about 6 years ago. We heard Howard just talking about in a casual conversation with Robin and Jimmy Kimmel. And we're big Howard fans, and we had a lot of clients on his show. And Jeff called them, and they at first said, well, we don't really need to do anything to be on. We don't need to do any more advertising or anything because we just got a plug on Howard's show. But that will last maybe, a couple days or so. So that's exactly why you need to be on his show, because he's passionate about it. So the next thing you know, we had Howard voicing commercials, and it went out really organically. Everybody from all the celebrities that appeared on the show heard him do his reads, and all his reads for his commercials spilled over into conversation. So somebody like a Bryan Cranston came on his show.
Jeez.
And talked about how he just got a Squatty Potty. And then he went on Kelly Ripa's show, and he said, I just got my wife for our anniversary a Squatty Potty because I heard about it on Howard Stern. And it went crazy because it helped them get on Shark Tank. And when they got funded on Shark Tank, even though they just had a little bit of money that they got from Shark Tank, it actually, Lori Grenier said the reason why she funded them was because she heard Howard talking about it.
Oh.
And so it was something that really, we didn't think it would take off with something like that.
So
but
you
it did.
got things moving for Squatty Potty.
Literally moving. Literally moving.
But there were a lot of influencers as
If
well.
you guys need, I would like to throw my hat in the ring. If you ever need a Squatty Potty, like a squat cast kind of thing, or like a, BM and like a champ podcast or something like that, just let me know. I'm there for you guys.
Okay.
So.
I almost thought you were going to offer an eBay kind of thing going on. And
I thought you were going to offer like your modeling skills. Or
Oh, no, nobody wants to see that.
I am a potty model.
There you go.
Nobody wants to see that.
We did a promotion with another host because we put him on tons of radio hosts and podcasts, and we had something where what was it? We did it at was it KLOS or was it Mark in the Morning, where they had some kind of a King of the Throne type of a thing, and people we did a whole promotion where we had people send in pictures of them on their Squatty Potty.
Game of potty?
Yeah, it was a potty mouth. I think it was called potty mouth. That's what it was called, potty mouth.
Oh my God, that's genius.
And we had it with social media, and it got a huge following. And then the stations put it on their website, and it was a pretty big, phenomenon. It was a big success.
Wow.
Yeah.
You guys that's really smart.
Yeah, that's you guys seeing like a nibble and going like, we're going in for the big bite because we've got this much. Let's keep going. Like, this is not where you back off.
That was a tough client because nobody wanted to talk about what the process of what you were doing. Who wants to talk about pooping? Okay,
right?
Nobody wanted to. We actually went. Jeff could tell you a story. We had Larry King as a spokesperson while we were doing it on Howard, and we went to his manager and tell him what he said.
I called him a few times, and every time I called him, he would always put me off. And then finally, I called him one day, and he said, I got to be honest with you. This is not something I think what Larry should be doing. I said, why? I said, Larry is a guy that really defined everything on health, from Welch's to Ginsana and all these great health products. He said, well, Larry, next thing you know, he'll be doing adult diapers. I said, he's 83 years old. What's wrong with him doing adult diapers?
If not now, when?
And he normalized it. We really made it so they defined the paradigm and made it so that,
if anything, he should be bragging that he's able to do it correctly. Like, look at me. I'm still using
I'm a big boy now.
That's right. And then he did it with his wife, the commercials with his wife on his podcast. And it was interesting to watch him read the commercials with his wife keeping a straight face.
It's all right. I want to thank everyone for being with us. Thank you, Rebecca Mahan, Dina Friedman.
Thank you for having me.
Jeff and Steve.
Thank you
for being with us. And of course, Dave Friedman.
Thank you.
Ryan Tabb and Lori. If you want to go around and tell people where they can find you online before we close, that would be wonderful.
You can find us at radioactivemedia.com.
Yeah,
radioactivemedia.com.
Yeah, I've been there. It's great.
Tone-talk.com.
RyanJTab.com.
You can just find me on Instagram at PickleMyth. Thank you.
And Lane and Franny, any socials to shout out? Come on, Lane.
it's just I'm just Lane McFadden.
Yeah, Lane McFadden.
Yeah,
also,
me.
My Favorite Murder. Check that out.
Yeah, that's actually my plug. Don't go to me. Go to them. They're more
Francesco Demanda.
Yeah, I'll double down on My Favorite Murder. Check them out.
And of course, Rebecca, where do we find you?
Just Google me. I'm all over the place.
Say it again. Say it one more time.
Rebecca L. Mahan.
Yay.
Google me. I'm all over.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us. I am Louise Palenker. This is Things I Found Online. We are part of the Big Head Media Podcasting Company, and we will see you next week. Bye-bye.